Yeah, the first time when my GB tri-suit arrived through the post, like I was so excited. It sort of really brings it home that yes, you've qualified, and yes, you are going to get the chance to represent Great Britain and really compete against some really talented age group athletes.
That's age group athlete Natalie Duncombe talking about her experience representing Great Britain for the first time at duathlon. And this is a special age group stories edition of the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. Hello and welcome to the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors PrecisionHydration.com. Electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat. You can get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. All right, everyone, welcome to the show, and I am happy to report welcome back to racing. I think it's the first real serious proper racing that's happened of this year, of 2020, and there's loads and loads and loads of races and results to be going into. So let's kick off straight away with it. We're going to start with WTS Hamburg. We're going to start on the ladies' side with a pretty commanding victory for Georgia Taylor-Brown. She pretty much put the hammer down right from the start of the run, and after the first couple of 100 metres, she was away. She wasn't headed by anybody, and she looked super in control the whole way. Flora Duffy coming through for second, Laura Kinderman of Germany coming through for third. Taylor Spivey going well in fourth. Bit of a disappointment for Katie Zafira. She looked a little bit off the pace, finishing in fifth. And Jess Lermont, she came out of transition really, really strong and was looking like she was really putting the pressure on for the first 500 metres or so and faded to seventh. So, yeah, really great racing. Really great to see that back on again out in Hamburg. Over on the men's side, it was a really strong performance and another win for Vincent Louis of France. He pretty much ran away from it in the last 200 metres, away from another really impressive performance by Vasco Valacha from Portugal on the back of his Super League performance a couple of weeks back, and Leo Berger from France rounding out the podium as well. We had Alex Yee in fifth. He came running through strongly at the end, and Ali Brownlee was exceptionally strong all the way through. He faded off the back of the run a little bit. Perhaps with his next day's endeavours in mind a little bit, when it looked like it wasn't going to go his way on the run. But still, I mean, he was only less than 20 seconds down at the finish in ninth place. He was super, super strong and driving the bike the whole way round. I'm assuming looking to set up for his brother, but that didn't happen on the day. But he looked incredibly impressive, and he looked to me like he'd muscled up quite a bit as well during the winter. That might just be the way it looked on the TV, but he looked like he'd significantly increased his kind of body mass around his shoulders and arms. Again, it might just be the way it looked on TV, but he looked like a super strong athlete again. And I don't know whether to go straight into his next endeavour. We'll do the relay championships first. It was the mixed relay championships the next day, and that, if anything, was even better, closer racing than it had been the day before. The lead changed constantly, different countries in the lead at different points, ending with the fourth leg, with the men getting into the water together pretty much, France, United States and Great Britain. And it ended up really pretty much with Connick's drilling the swim, really. Pearson from the USA got gapped as well at the start of the bike, and Yee as well. So it ended up with first place for France, second for United States, and third place, the bronze medal for Great Britain. But Norway coming through really strongly in the end. They were about 50 seconds down, but Gustav Iden bringing it home for them. So it was great racing. And we mentioned Ali Brownlee just a little bit before. I really couldn't believe that this was going to happen before it did actually happen. He was down to race the Hamburg Sprint Championships at lunchtime on Saturday, and then to be starting the swim before 8 o'clock the next morning at the Helvellyn Triathlon, mountain triathlon in the northwest of the UK. I thought that was one of those things that it's just never going to happen. And when his name was added onto the World Champ starter list, I just thought, well, that's it. He's not going to be at Helvellyn. But there he was. And what a commanding performance he put in as well. He pretty much led from gun to tape. He had some company on the bike and for the first half of the run from George Goodwin. But I've got to say, he looks incredibly strong. I've done that event a couple of times, and it's never been more than a walk for me or most of the field going up. It's a power walk going up Helvellyn. Videos I've seen of him look like he's out for a Sunday run, but just to be able to run up that hill is incredible. And even seeing footage of him going over the tops and up Swirl Edge and the rock climbing-y, scrambly type bits, he looks really at home on that kind of terrain as well. So no surprise to see him bring it home in a new course record of 3:16. Hats off to both Judge Goodwin and Jack Willis in second and third. Judge Goodwin ran a good portion of the race with him, or rode a good portion of the race with him and got gapped on the run. And then Jack Willis came through with the fastest run of the day. And there was a sprint finish between George and Jack, and it actually went down to who started first with the 5-second time intervals to decide who actually took the overall second and third. So George took second from Jack overall. I believe the sprint finish was just edged by Jack at the time from friends I had up there. So I don't have that confirmed, but the overall result is Ali Brownlee first, George Goodwin second, Jack Willis in third. We also had Elliot Smales there in fourth, Jack Hindle in fifth. For the pro women, Nikki Bartlett put out an exceptionally good performance going 3:51. Ruth Astle was in second place with 4:02 and India Lee in 4:08. Some exceptionally strong performances. And it was great to see the PTO trying something different here and offering the prize money based on a 28-minute and 3-second time adjustment. So overall, that put Nikki Bartlett in fifth place, and it put Ruth Astle in 8th place. So, yeah, fair play. It's a nice little earner, especially for Nikki there, taking home close to $1,400. So good to see the PTO putting some real decent money into the race. And I think obviously having Ali Brownlee there as the headline figure is going to do a lot for them. But I think they've gained a lot of column inches and gained a lot of traction by putting this race on the map. Ali Brownlee then went ahead to donate his prize money and his winnings, which would have been $3,000. He split it equally between the pros who didn't win any money on the day and the other half going to the Brownlee Foundation. So, yeah, hats off to him. That's a real good thing to be done. Okay, other events that were going on. There was 2 or 3 70.3s going on around the world this weekend as well. I had a couple of guys racing out in France at 70.3 Les Sables d'Olonne, which is down on the Vendée, and it looks like a really amazing, stunning course. You swim off the beach, turn around and swim back up into the sort of $1 million yacht marina where the Vendée Globe race finishes. Quick bike course, quick run. The weather looks like it was decent as well. Result were taken out over on the men's side. Rudy von Berg, who finished second at the World 70.3 Champs last year in Nice, he took the win from Anthony Costas and Peter Heinrich. Over on the ladies' side, we had Justine Mathieu from France, from Alexander Tondeur, and Fenella Langridge from the UK taking out third place. Dave McNamee was in sixth place. He's got a very funny Instagram post where he says 15k in and I needed a code brown. So God bless him to manage to get himself to the toilets without having any kind of accident that's going to end up on social media for the rest of his life. God bless him. All right, shout out to our sponsors, Precision Hydration. If you are training indoors over the winter, if you've got any races lined up, you need to be taking care of your electrolytes to make sure that you've got your hydration needs sorted. Remember, hydration is more than just drinking water. It's about also having the right concentration of electrolytes so that fluid gets absorbed quickly, and also to promote the correct firing of your muscles and muscle contractions to avoid getting cramp. So any of you racing late season races, if you're going to Outlaw X or any of the other races that are still on, especially if it's warm, make sure you know how much electrolytes you need in your water. You can check that out over on their website at precisionhydration.com. And also, you can get yourself a nice little discount at Precision Hydration if you've not ordered from them. You can get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. If you're looking for some guidance and help with your training this year, if you want to come and have a train with us over on Zwift, if you've got Zwift, Tuesdays at 7:15 p.m. UK time, you can take part for free in the Oxygen Addict Triathlon podcast Power Hour. These are training sessions designed and written by me. It's the same session that my athletes are going to be doing that week. These sessions are written to be guaranteed to raise your FTP and give you a faster, more powerful bike leg for this coming season. So there's still time to make some adjustments and improvements before end of season races. And we're going to have these going all through the winter as well. So you're really going to be able to make a dent in your triathlon bike leg time simply by training along with me and the rest of our athletes. So check that out over on Zwift, Tuesdays, 7:15 p.m. UK time. You can just find it in the listings of events on the top right on the homepage of Zwift, or find it in Zwift Companion. Look forward to seeing you there. We usually have over 100 athletes from over 30 different countries taking part in these. So get on it. Come and join us. If you'd like to find out more about triathlon coaching, you can come over and check out team.oxygenaddict.com. There's a link in the show notes you can click to book a call with me to talk about your coaching needs. And any questions you've got, I'll be happy to answer for you to see how we over at Team Oxygen Addict can help you out. Okay, this week's interview of the week, I've got a cracker for you with one of the athletes that I coach. This is age group of Natalie Duncombe. She's only been into multisport for a couple of years, but zoomed straight in there from a really strong running background, picked up biking really quickly, managed to get herself to the ETU European Duathlon Championships, and has medalled the last couple of times. So I thought this would make a really interesting interview for people who have got ambitions to go to the European champs or the world champs in the Great Britain age group races. Hear about what the experience is like, especially if you're a newbie coming from a single sport background and you're wondering if it's possible. Nat is proof that it is absolutely possible. So without further ado, I'll take us over to our interview of the week with Natalie Duncombe. All right, Nat, welcome to the show. Hello, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you.
Not sure about being interviewed yet?
No, not really.
The reason I wanted to get you on is I want to get the opportunity to have someone tell the story of what it's like racing for GB, racing in the kit at the Europeans or the Worlds. And there's hardly been any racing on this year, but what there has been, you managed to get a little bit of back in March, didn't you? So I thought we'd get you on and chat about that a little bit.
Yes, I did. I was one of the few fortunate triathletes this year to get the chance to race. So, very grateful for that.
So it was, let's go back, I've got the dates here, the 7th of March, wasn't it, at the European Sprint Distance Duathlon Championships? Yeah,
so sort of 2 or 3 weeks before UK went into lockdown.
Yeah, it wasn't long at all, was it really?
No, I think we were back for a week, and then the world went a little bit crazy. And the weekend after the Sprint Duathlon Championships was the Sprint Tri Championships in the same venue, and they never went ahead. So literally was the last race to go. So very fortunate.
It was the last thing that happened. Wow. And thinking back to then, was there even a sense that this was gonna happen? I mean, I'm trying to remember back to what March was like, because we had a training camp plan, didn't we, for the end of March? And
no, not at all. And I was sort of reflecting on this at the time, no, there was no real sense of how this was all going to unfold. Bar a few things, like we didn't have the plunge pool at the end of the race, and they were really good with sort of funneling people through the finish line. There wasn't really, certainly from my perspective, that this was going to transpire into what it was. So in a good way, that meant that it didn't really impact the sort of the race feel. It felt very normal compared to perhaps how it feels at races that are able to go ahead now. But no, there was certainly I didn't realize that potentially would be the last time I'd race this year. So
wow. So you just squeezed it in under the wire.
Yeah, I did. And you know what, that's made a massive difference to how lockdown has felt for me. And I think I said this to you before, I trained really hard for that race. And if that race hadn't gone ahead, lockdown for me would have been very different. But, I was really lucky that I got to go and put out, the result of the hard winter. So lockdown for me, I felt in a much better place than I know a lot of my friends won't have been. So really, really grateful.
And especially when you have that context of the sprint distance triathlon having been cancelled just 5 or 6 days later, all of those ladies and gentlemen would have been in the same position, training really hard all through the winter to try and peak in early March.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Like I say, I'm just really grateful that, all of that hard work I got to put in the end performance. And for those that, a week's difference meant that, for them, that they never really knew what they were going to be capable of after all that hard work. So yeah, really, really unfortunate.
Well, let's go back a little bit. Let's talk about your sort of sporting background before triathlon and duathlon, and how you ended up in the sport in the first place, because you had quite a rapid move up the ranks, as it were, really, didn't you?
Yeah, so I've been doing multisport for 3 years now. I've always been an active individual, love PE, was involved in all the sports teams at school, and netball really was my main sport. So I played netball at sort of club and county level through school, and took that to a reasonably high level through university. And then after uni, I carried on with netball, and I sort of picked up running as a means of keeping fit. And I think the first sort of running event that I entered was the Great North Run with my dad, fundraising for Mind charity. And that was the first time that I'd really sort of followed a training program as it was. And at that point, I started to get more into endurance sports. So from the Great North Run, I moved into the Edinburgh Marathon. And at the point I finished the Edinburgh Marathon, I vowed I would never do long distance because it really just did not go. It did not go to plan. I think, looking back, I was definitely a victim of overtraining, undereating, and sort of injuring myself the week before and not making the right decision not to run. So, looking back now, I'm very surprised that I'm, 2 days away from doing a half distance triathlon. But so
we'll get to that for sure.
So I moved into running, and that sort of continued, and I entered like a local 10K. That was the Goresworth 10K. It must have been back in maybe 2015 now. And I ended up being first female. And at that point I thought, maybe this is something that, I might be quite good at, and I'll sort of pick up the running a little bit more. So I continued to run at like a local level, entering local races. But then I sort of, out of the blue, had a hip injury, not running or cycling or anything. It happened in the gym, and transpires it was sort of, something around my physiology that just went wrong that day. But that meant 6 months out of running. And it sort of just, conversations with the specialists during that time made me realise that running was probably not the best thing for me to be doing as a sole sport. So, as part of while I couldn't run, I spent a lot of time in the gym finding new things to do. So
right.
I did a lot of, I managed to do my first pull-up, and, I learned to do a lot more sort of bodyweight exercises and stuff. And I really started to find like a love for the gym and a love in somewhere else, which is quite difficult when you get your main sport taken away from you sort of unexpectedly. But then I came, as part of my rehab, I did sort of hydrotherapy, swimming, and a lot of stuff on the spin bike. And I sort of thought, the cycling business is quite fun. I sort of came across the potential for GB age group at the same time that I was coming back from that injury. And I think I sort of clung on to the fact that I'd quite enjoyed cycling during my rehab, and maybe there's an opportunity to represent Great Britain. And so I sort of ended up really progressing running and cycling in parallel. And that's how I sort of ended up in duathlon. And like you say, it kind of went quite quickly from there.
It's the classic story, isn't it, that so many people end up in multisport by accident, and usually through injury. It's usually runners who end up here through injury, because it's either runners who end up in it through injury or swimmers who end up in it through boredom. Very rarely it's a cyclist who comes into it from any direction, but injured runners who come into the sport and then do very well. Often the story is, well, this is kind of an accident that I'm here, because if I could still be running all the time. And it turns out that, as we probably should realize from listening to our Olympians, running a lot and running all the time is incredibly hard on the body.
Yeah.
It's incredibly hard for age groupers to do all the time, just because we haven't got the time or the money or the resources to get the massage and the physio that a body needs to be running every day or twice a day.
And I think running lots combined with poor nutrition and combined with, poor recovery and lack of strength and conditioning, it's just a bit of a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
that's kind of where I ended up. But I'd never heard of duathlon until that point. I didn't swim. I'd only ever really heard of triathlon being the main multi-sport. And, now there's loads of opportunities to do multi-sport in almost whichever combination suits your strength best. So no, it's been a great move for me. It's opened up so many opportunities, and I've met so many people. It's sort of the light at the end of the tunnel from that whole experience of picking up an injury. Yeah, so it's all worked out well in the end.
Yeah. And so what was the point? Our paths crossed then. That was, you started coming down to the track sessions.
Yeah. So
that's for Tri Club. When was that? When would that have been?
So that would have probably been 2018. And
you were still pretty much just running then, weren't you? You just got into riding that year, maybe?
Yeah, so possibly when we met, I'd been through, so I guess we've been coaching together for the past 2 Europeans that I've been to. The first one that I did in 2018 was in Ibiza, and I self-coached myself.
That's right. And it was just before that, wasn't it? It was just before that.
Yeah, it was just before that. So I think we'd met through Knutsford Tri Club, sort of in the lead up to. And I think just, how that went and knowing that I wanted to carry on kind of was where that sparked. Yeah, I probably can't do this myself anymore. Probably someone who knows what they're doing. But yeah, I think, the first qualifying event that I entered was my second ever duathlon. And the first duathlon was a DNF because I crashed. So yeah, it really, I didn't give myself much chance to sort of perfect it before taking up the plunge to try and qualify. But like I say, it's all worked out.
Have you always been kind of like jumping at the deep end?
No.
Really?
No, I mean that I know we acknowledged that yesterday, that this has certainly changed through lockdown. But yeah, I would say I'm a very risk averse person. I like to know what I'm signing up for, and I like to feel comfortable that I can do what I'm letting myself in for. So
yeah.
I'm not really sure. I think for me, with the qualification for age group representation, you really have nothing to lose. Like, you just have to select one of the qualifying events, which are open to everybody. They're open to individuals that have no intention of qualifying. So you get a real spectrum of ability. Once you've registered your interest, you just have to go and race like you would whether you'd signed up or not. So there wasn't really anything to lose. I mean, don't get me wrong, I didn't think that in my first duathlon that I finished, I would get a qualifying spot. And I was very shocked that I did, but that's what happened. So yeah, it was the right decision. But no, I absolutely haven't been someone for throwing myself into the deep end.
So what was your thought process then behind? Obviously, you've decided you want to qualify for Great Britain really before you've even done a duathlon, which is awesome, and I completely applaud. But that doesn't marry up with your image of yourself as someone who doesn't do something that they're not completely sure of yet.
Yeah, I think it was that opportunity to take sport to another level that I'd not really done before.
Right.
Like I'd run recreationally essentially, and I'd entered local races and even with netball and through school, like I'd played to a club level, but even when I made it to county, I more often than not was on the bench, or so I'd sort of almost got to taking the sports that I love to a high level, but never really made it. So
okay,
it kind of, there's not a lot of opportunities for age groupers in many sports to sort of step it up once you leave college or uni. And I think I just saw that opportunity and thought, this is something that has been missing a little bit throughout, my last few years. So yeah, but you're right. Yeah. a characteristic. But I think, what have I got to lose? The risk of not qualifying is essentially none.
That's right.
I've paid my interest. Like, I'll lose my money, but in the grand scheme of things, I'd be more frustrated if I'd have raced and qualified and not registered my interest, and then would be kicking myself. So yeah, no, it's an interesting point, but yeah, I think it was that opportunity to sort of step it up and see where things could go, and it's worked out far different or better than I thought it would have done.
Nice. Yeah. Are you finding it a bit refreshing? That I think one of the possibly frustrating things around people who are really good at team sports, like you were, getting to county level is really impressive at a sport like netball. But then your ability to actually play and take part is determined by the skill level of the people around you. And, you can be really good, but not get a chance to play just because whatever it is, 7 other people on the team is it 7? I'm guessing.
7 on a netball team.
There you go. I used to be a PE teacher back in the day. 7 other players are a bit better than you. So is there a kind of element of taking your fate into your own hands a little bit more with the individual sport?
Yeah, definitely. And it was very much that, I was on the bench because there were people that were better than me. It was definitely, that was the case. And yeah, absolutely. I like to think that, or I like it when I know that my result has been determined solely by my performance. And again, that's something that was a bit difficult with, I guess, the draft legal type of racing that I've certainly found myself in over the past few, or I think, 2 of the 3 European Championships that I've done. There is an element of that your performance is dictated by others around you. So, that I didn't find that too fun at the start. But yeah, absolutely. The individual sport meant that I had sole control over how I performed and I could make those decisions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's talk us through your first sort of GB experience, and then we'll go forward through them and see how the races played out and what changed over that time. So was Ibiza the first one you did, you said?
So the first one was Ibiza in 2018. That was the sprint distance European Championship. So that was my first time wearing the GB tri-suit. And I think on reflection, my lead up to that was so much pressure put on myself. So much pressure. I was so stressed and tired and training far more than I needed to in the lead up to that. And, because you don't know what to expect, it's the unknown, isn't it? It doesn't help you feel very settled before you go. But yeah, the first time when my GB tri-suit arrived through the post, like I was so excited. It sort of really brings it home that yes, you've qualified and yes, you are going to get the chance to represent Great Britain and, really compete against some really talented age group athletes. And so, yeah, that was in October 2018. And the morning of the race, we flew out there plenty of days in advance so that I could get comfortable with the course. We ended up actually staying pretty much in an apartment right on the start line, so I could roll out of bed into transition. And yeah, that was all great. We had really unfortunate weather, so the transition was meant to be on the beach. And over the first few days of arriving, we watched all of these volunteers laying out transition on the beach, and the day before it was all good to go, and then we had horrendous storms the night before, and in the space of only a handful of hours, all of these volunteers, we were just watching the transition go underwater.
Oh,
so
no.
They had to move it all up into the town centre, which us triathletes like to know what's happening, and to wake up in the morning and the start line and the transition and the bike in and out and the run in and out being a different place. Yeah, that was tough.
Stressful.
Yeah. And I was really stressed in the morning of the race. I had all my friends and family with me, but, I was in tears, just feeling under all of this pressure to perform. Now I was wearing this tri-suit, and I remember racking my bike and looking at all of these, nice, snazzy bikes and stuff around me. And, I was really fortunate that my friend had lent me one of his road bikes, which was a great bike. And I was really sad actually when I did eventually have to give that back to him. But I just rocked up, having trained hard with what I had, and stood on the start line really, really nervous. But as soon as the countdown went and there was silence around, I just remember an overwhelming feeling of excitement. And from that point onwards, it was just like being in any other race. Like, you enjoyed it. You had the crowd, you had people around you. And I mean, unfortunately, the race didn't pan out as I would have liked it to. The first run went fine. It was run along the promenade. The sun at this point was shining. The rain had stopped. The bike leg was draft illegal, and it was all going brilliantly. But because of the course change, for a lot of athletes and a lot of marshals, it was confusing. So as we were coming, it was a lapped course, and there was a point where you would turn to go back on your second lap, or you'd go straight on into transition. And going into transition, the girl in front of me slammed on her brakes, I think in a bit of a panic of, am I going the right way or the wrong way? Anyway, I was going at some speed and went flying straight into the back of her. Came off my bike. She was fine. I think I just sort of petted her along a few meters. She carried on, but I came off my bike and I'm now sat on the floor, in pain, just in shock that this was like my first opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, that's it. That's over. And unfortunately, I fell right in front of where my husband was watching, which is not ideal. But also right by a marshal as well. So the marshal just said to me, you need to finish. And I looked down. I'd snapped off my front left shifter. There was blood coming from my knees and my hands. And he said, you won't need to change gear between now and the time you have to dismount. So just get on your bike and go. So it did. And there's a picture of me cycling into that transition with a smile on my face, my left shifter hanging off my bike, blood pouring down my legs. And I think that just kind of sums it up. Like, the atmosphere just takes away from whatever's happening on the course on that day. And anyway, I finished. By the time I got into T2, I'd sort of negated all thoughts around performance. I was just in a lot of pain, just wanted to make sure I got my medal. But you know what? That didn't ruin the whole experience. It, like you say, these things are a learning for me. But I was starting to build up a bit of a reputation of not being able to stay on my bike. So I think in that race, I came fifth in my age group, and maybe sort of top 30 overall females, I think it was. I was really happy. I think it might even have been 40th. I've just got here on my sheet. Yeah, I came 40th female and fifth in my age group. But, I just represented Great Britain for the first time. So
yeah. And considering you've had a horrendous bike crash in the middle of it, then
yeah.
Pretty damn good to be only a couple of places away from a medal in your age group, hey?
Yeah. And the great thing as well is that I'd done enough to pre-qualify for the next championship. So if you finish as in the top three of Brits in your age group, and I think you have to be maybe within the top 10 overall in your age group, you pre-qualify for the next year. So that was really nice, feeling that this race hadn't quite gone to plan, but I would have the opportunity if I wanted it to go back and try again. So yeah, that was experience number one.
Okay. And then where was the next year's then?
So the following years was in you just said this because you want me to pronounce the location. Was in Târgu in Romania.
Very impressive.
And that must have been maybe June or something the following year. So again, it was sprint distance duathlon. The difference being it was draft legal this time, whereas Ibiza was draft illegal. The weather was significantly hotter and drier than Ibiza had been.
And how's the experience different racing in a draft legal race for someone who's, you're a very strong runner anyway, so talk us through how the race tends to go in a draft legal race.
Yeah, I'd love to say I went in with a plan and I executed it consciously, and that's all how it panned out. I think the thing with draft legal is, and it's, it was my first ever experience of racing draft legal as well. But obviously, as a strong runner, I could consciously, not save myself for the run leg. That is actually what ended up happening, but that wasn't a conscious decision. That was just the way the race panned out. But yeah, I managed to end up in quite a big group of girls on the bike, and who ended up doing most of the work. I did minimal front work on the bike in that race, predominantly because I was really struggling to keep up with them. There were some really strong female cyclists out that year. And yeah, I guess, like you say, I'm a strong runner, so I was blessed at that point that I'd been able to get myself into a big group on the bike and then save some effort in my legs for the run. But yeah, the draft legal racing is very different. In Punta Umbria this year, I ended up just being two of us on the bike leg, and we worked that really well. We took it in turns to ride on the front, and we really had a good race together. But yeah, having other people dictate how your bike leg goes is very different, and I think sometimes it can be quite unpredictable in the draft racing, depending on whether you can keep up with the group that you're in, or you get spat out the back, which did happen in Romania. So I didn't finish in the group that I started with. But yeah, I was lucky that I could get onto a group because others couldn't. So yeah, it's very different.
Yeah. And where did you end up in the last run in Romania? How did that play out?
Yeah, so Romania went really well. So I finished 5th female overall and 2nd in my age group. So yeah, that was a really sort of momentous race.
Took the silver.
Picking up my first European medal was an amazing experience. Yeah, I felt like a right professional. It was great. It was really good. So yeah, that went, and that's just the difference of 12 months of training, I guess. It was a strong field, and a lot of things changed in that 12 months. We started coaching, and yeah, it was a surprise. Actually, it was a surprise.
And then fast forward to 2020, the famous race that happens just before lockdown. Obviously, you've got another year's worth of racing and training in your legs by this point, and obviously carrying the confidence of having already firstly raced in a draft legal European champs, but also having a medal hung around your neck last time. Did that change your sort of self-perception a little bit going into the race this year?
Yeah, definitely. This year at Punta Umbria was the first race where I stood on the start line, not feeling stressed, not feeling worried, and actually not feeling under pressure, which I was surprised at because, like you say, I already had a silver medal, and there's that, you kind of need to be as good as or better. But yeah, I don't know what happened subconsciously, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I felt confident going into Punta Umbria, but I've certainly learned to recognise how training goes. Is kind of all I need to be thinking about on that start line. Punta Umbria, I certainly was reflecting on the fact, I've got 12 months of training in me now. I've done everything that you've asked me to do. I've ticked off all of my sessions. That's not, I don't need to worry about anything else whilst I'm standing on here. I just need to go and execute it. And I don't even say that I stand on the start line with much of a plan. I've got quite good at feeling how hard I'm working. So I've got quite good at reading my own, how things feel. And yeah, I think that's what changed, is just learning that your race is, your race is what you're working towards, and your race is the reason why you get out of bed at 5:30 in the morning, because you want to put in the best performance. But, you've got so many more hours of training behind you, and this is just an hour. So I think one massive thing that's changed for me is that the result of that race is not what I need to measure my success. That's an added bonus at the end.
Good.
I think one thing that changed in Romania was, I crossed the finish line not knowing where I placed, but all I had in my head was that was a brilliant race, and that's what I've taken going forward. Whereas before with my running events and stuff, it was always like, I came here or I came here, so therefore that was a good race or a bad race. But now, it's much more of those sort of process focused goals, and so many things on the day you can't control.
Yeah. And especially when you're racing sprint, when you say it, Rob, when you're racing draft legal, there's all the other athletes' performances are going to affect your performance in a way that doesn't happen in long distance racing or draft illegal racing.
Yeah.
So talk us through how that race went, because you had a really strong first run, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So I started off, I say I wasn't confident, but I made sure I was fairly at the front on the start line. Running's my strength, so I wanted to make sure I got a clear start. And the gun went, and I, within the first 100 meters, I was thinking, "God blimey, like these girls are going off absolutely rapid. This is not how I planned it."
Yeah.
I thought I'd be well up the front of the runners, and I think it's 5K to start off with, and I was, in my head, I was way back. But again, I think perhaps something I've developed in my ability to pace. I ended up coming into T1 in second female. So, I managed to make my way up throughout the run. So yeah, I came into T1 a handful of seconds behind the first lady, and got on my bike and got out on the road, and I knew she wouldn't be that far ahead. So I thought, based on my learnings from Targ Mures, if I can catch up with her, then we can do this draft legal business properly.
Yeah.
And I mean, you never know whether someone's up for working together or not. But yeah, I managed to catch her up within probably a couple of kilometers, and we led the ride, just the two of us, for all bar the last final K. It was a straight, fairly flat 2-lap course, I think it was. And obviously then on a lap, when you're going back parallel, you can see the big pack getting closer and closer, and we just worked together. We took it in turns. And it was only in that last K, and again, this just comes with experience, like they were catching up on us, and it's that decision of, do I just let them catch up and save myself for the run, or do I just carry on? And the other girl that was on the front with me, she made the decision to, save something and drop back. And I just thought, nope. And I just carried on, which on reflection, I think next time that's not the decision I'd make. But they caught me up in the end anyway. They caught me up with like 100 meters to go. So going into T2, there was a big bunch of us. And I was at that point really cross with myself, because, I'd pretty much led the run. I pretty much led the bike. And now we were back on a level pegging. Like,
Yeah.
30 odd of us all coming out onto the final run together. But I don't know what happened. Like, I know that running is my strongest discipline. And I headed out on that final run, just determined not to let that moment of like negativity sort of dictate how my race panned out. And I just picked off people sort of one by one as I went round. And in my head, it was going through, oh, well, I know I haven't got a medal at the moment. Like, I know that I'm in this position now, because you can see where everyone else is. But with sort of like 500-600 meters to go, I don't know what happened. I just found another level. And I finished joint third overall, female, and second in my age group. And the medal winner for my age group was the girl that had been riding together with me on the bike leg. So, that was great. I'd lost out to the overall winner of my age group.
The overall winner, yeah. I love that. I've got your little race report here that you wrote to me, and it says, I slowly worked my way up the pack. I was 7th with 700 meters to go, 5th with 200 meters to go, and a sprint finish in the final 50 to take third.
Yeah, and you know what? I was really cross because I watched a video there's some videos of like the finish, and I ended up coming joint third overall. But if I hadn't stopped my Garmin, I might have just pipped it to actual third. Like, you watched me cross the finish line, and I literally just slowed down that little couple of seconds.
Really?
To stop my Garmin, yes, that was a bit annoying, but I might.
there's a lesson for next time, hey?
Yeah, exactly. So no, it was a brilliant race. Yeah, it's exactly how I'd wanted it to go in the end.
Awesome. So decent runner, decent biker. The obvious thing we've got to do is kick you in the bum and get you into triathlon. And what better, easier first open water triathlon to undertake than Helvellyn?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there for me.
But we don't know what happened yet, because as we're recording, we're still 3 days before the race actually happening. And by the time it goes out, we'll know how you've got on. So it's this, and then it's Outlaw X for the sort of middle distance debut as well.
Yeah.
How are you looking forward to the sort of step up in distance?
I mean, like I said at the beginning, I never thought I'd find myself in this position, because I was very much convinced after my marathon experience that long endurance stuff was not for me. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Actually, I think it's happening at the right time. I love sprint distance, and I still love all of those types of sessions that I did as part of sprint distance training when they crop up. But I think, certainly within the OxygenAddict group, there's so many inspirational stories of people doing middle distance and long distance, and it just sort of changes your perspective and reasoning for doing things.
Got under your skin a bit, has it? It's got under your skin a bit, has it?
Yeah, definitely. And
good.
I'm at a point of I think it's finding something that I, like you mentioned at the beginning, I signed up for doing an age group competition, not really knowing if I could do duathlon, and I think that's kind of what I've done with middle distance now. I'm ready to sort of challenge myself a bit more. So I was hoping to do Outlaw Holcombe in May, but obviously because of COVID that's pushed back. So I'm really, really actually quite glad, because it's given me a bit of a longer time to make that transition. And actually, I was thinking it's quite ironic. This weekend I should have been doing the World Sprint Duathlon Championships. So this is quite a change from where I should have been.
Just slightly.
Months ago, yeah. But no, I'm really looking forward to it. I've really enjoyed the training, and it's obviously very different to what I've done before. So we'll see how it goes. But Helvellyn as a first open water triathlon will be interesting.
I tell you what, there is not a more beautiful race in the country or the world, I don't think, to do than this one. Just crank the water temperature up maybe just a little bit, it would be absolutely perfect. But I'm sure you'll have fun.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right, so who's helped you out along the way? I know you've had some great strength and conditioning coaching. You've had some nice sponsorship as well. So let's wrap this up by giving a shout out to those people, I reckon.
Yeah, so I guess I mentioned before, I think one of the problems I had with where I ended up with running was a lack of strength and conditioning, and just not being a very robust athlete and picking up injuries. So yeah, I've been working with Dom from Macclesfield Performance for 5 years now. And strength and conditioning is a massive part of what I do every week. And since that, I touch wood. Today's probably not the day to say this, but I've not been seriously injured since taking up multi-sport. So yeah, she's had a massive impact on that. And then I've been really lucky this past season to pick up some sponsorship from Thornycroft solicitors, and they've been ace in helping me get the kit that I need to do what I want to do at a level, so that the level I am. So yeah, I'm also really grateful for that as well. And I'm really lucky as an age group athlete to have that kind of help. So it's really lucky.
Nice, good stuff. Hey, well, listen, I've really enjoyed chatting with you and hearing your story, and I'm sure everyone else has as well, in terms of managing to pull on the GB tri-suit and perform at a level to get medals. It's a massive performance. So well done on making the massive improvements you have in such a short period of time. And I really look forward to seeing how you go with the middle distance.
Exciting, hey?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great interview there with Nat. I hope you enjoyed that. And just to follow up on what we talked about there at the end of the interview, Nat raced this past weekend at Helvellyn and had to great success in her first open water triathlon, especially considering the extreme nature of the event, to jump into a first open water triathlon at Helvellyn in the freezing cold water. She managed to finish 4th age grouper in the female side, which is fantastic. She was only a couple of minutes away from 3rd place. And that was after, in her words, verging it on the way down Kirkstone Pass, nearly coming off, but managing to hold it together, losing a chain, having to stop and put it back on. She closed with the fastest age group female run, and it was the 3rd fastest run of the day in the females overall. So a stonking good performance from that. And who knows, maybe it's the power of being on the podcast, Nat, that manages to pull a performance out of you. All right, so hats off to any of you who raced up at Helvellyn this weekend. The weather was absolutely hideous. I've done the event 2 or 3 times, and a couple of times in nice weather, one time in absolutely hideous weather, where we didn't even get to go up onto the tops because of the wind. Reports I've heard is that the weather was even worse this year than the year we weren't allowed on tops in terms of the rain and the cold. So yeah, well done. You've done a cracking job if you've got yourself to the finish line of that. And awesome to see big names like Ali Brownlee racing the event, and keeping the tradition of top British athletes racing the long-standing legendary races like that, as well as racing world championships. That's going to go down in history, isn't it? Racing the world champs 12 hours before winning Helvellyn. I think the guy's an absolute legend. I'd love to get him on the show for an interview. Well, that just about brings us to the end of this week's show. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much for our sponsors, precisionhydration.com. Remember, you can get yourself 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. Okay, so until next week, if you're interested in triathlon coaching, pop on over to teamoxygenaddict.com. I think we've got the most comprehensive triathlon coaching program for busy age groupers. And if you're thinking about coaching over the winter, give us a shout. There's a link in the show notes for all our sponsors. You can book a call with me and the team there if you want to talk about coaching. You can click on the link there to go straight through to the Precision Hydration website. So until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. See ya.